In terms of climate finance, we all know that it's not spread equally across the world and also not spread to where the most vulnerable countries are. So 80% or 87% of climate finance is focused in Western Europe, East Asia, and North America. And obviously there's many countries and many of our member countries as an intergovernmental organization that would really benefit from additional climate finance and funding to help climate responses. Now, Article 6 offers a very promising approach, and GGGI has put a lot of effort into this as a new potential income stream for countries to be able to respond to the climate challenge. Research indicates that it could more than double emissions mitigation efforts if the savings from these cooperative approaches are reinvested to increase ambition. And also in terms of efficiency, and I love efficiency because I'm an economist, it is apparently going to potentially include 21 trillion USD savings if we do it in this way. So it will really help accelerate the progress towards mitigation aims that we all have and we all hold dear. But it really depends on innovation. Innovation is relevant and essential across every area of our work. So pushing those frontiers, and Gold Standard and GGGI, I feel, are both really trying to push those frontiers in terms of what to do, how to do it, and how to provide maximum support to countries that need it. This includes looking at policy-based approaches, scaling models, digital MRV, and also affordable MRV. And here the startups globally are really helping to make that measurement and verification more affordable. Now, Article 6 carbon trading can help cover the costs of high-impact projects, but we obviously have to have those robust and trustworthy standards. And that's where Gold Standard has set the gold standard and has become a household name in this area. And we're really absolutely privileged to be sharing the stage today with Gold Standard. They have over 3,000 projects globally since their start in 2003. And $56 billion has been generated, and over 340 million tons of CO2 has been mitigated. These are big numbers, and they're so important for the world. Now, in terms of GGGI's model, we embed ourselves in our country governments around the world. And of course, the actions have to be taken at the country level. So we're currently working in over 20 countries around the world, and some of those countries are here today. Gold Standard has also been instrumental in pioneering new methodologies, including a policy-level crediting methodology, which paves the way for a new level of ambition and emissions reduction under Article 6. Now, we have a very aligned vision between Gold Standard and ourselves, and I'm sure many of you here today. I'm going to learn. I always learn when I sit in a carbon forum, and I hope you enjoy this session as much as I know I will. Before I hand over, I just want to recognise the team that has been great in setting this up and delivering all of the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. I think we will move straight to the presentation now. So the first presentation is going to be from myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Fenella Awan from GGGI, and I am Director and Head of Carbon Pricing for the organisation. And I'm going to explain a little bit about a new initiative that we have launched last month to help scale up carbon markets. So the carbon transaction facility, I think just before I go into that, what I shall do, yes, it worked, good, is just give a very brief explanation of who GGGI is for those who are not familiar. We are a membership intergovernmental organisation that works for supporting its member countries for a vision of green growth. And it works as a trusted advisor through a business model of being embedded within its member countries within the ministries. So we currently have 49 member countries, and we're hoping to sign the 50th within the next week or two. We have leveraged and mobilized over 10 billion US dollars to green investment commitments. We currently have an active about 250, 260 projects globally, and we generally view the idea that $1 given to us for technical assistance leverages around $25 of capital invested. So as far as GGGI's carbon activities are concerned, we're currently working in over 20 countries with about half a dozen donors through a variety of different programs. And we expect that this will increase to more like 30 within the next half year to full year. We work directly with governments rather than private sector, and we work on helping them to get ready to trade in Article 6. So I don't know whether we thank the negotiators or curse them for making it quite complicated, but sorry. But I will say, yeah, our job is to try and make it easier and understandable for countries to be able to participate in it. And to be able to identify what activities could actually trade under Article 6. So in the middle of October, we had our Global Green Growth Week and what we call our Council and Assembly, which is effectively our board meeting. And our chair is Mr. Ban Ki-moon. And he launched what we call the Carbon Transaction Facility. It is a collection of trust funds aimed at taking countries from start to finish to be able to open up carbon markets generally, but also for seller countries particularly to be able to access carbon markets. One thing that we felt was very important, and the participants in the fund also agreed was very important, was to try and even up the playing field. Generally, buyers in this market, the developed countries, have a lot more information at their fingertips. They understand markets, they've participated in markets longer. So this structure is aimed at trying to help flatten it or even up the playing field. So it consists of a multi-donor trust fund for technical assistance funding for readiness. So all the participants that hold buying funds to buy ITMOs and additional contributors participate in the Article 6 readiness facility. And that is aimed at helping with a variety of aspects that then will generate project idea notes, or as they're now generally being referred to, mitigation activity idea notes. And that's the blue box on the left. And then on the right, you have a series of boxes which are single donor trust funds, which will purchase ITMOs. So they are there to actually complete the transaction. So the idea is that a seller country will receive technical assistance support to understand how the market works, to be able to access the market, and then we support them the whole way through to ensure that trades are actually completed. And GGGI acts as trustee to the funds within the Carbon Transaction Facility. Then if we move on, what kinds of things do we help with? So here you will see stakeholder mapping, market understanding and awareness raising. That's where we start. Quite often you'll see that, well, we want capacity building. Yes, but what do you need capacity building on? Well, we don't know because our capacity hasn't been built yet. So you've kind of got to work out, you've got to start somewhere. So that is who's in the country, how is the government structured, which ministries do they imagine need to be involved, a wider stakeholder understanding, could even be including private sector here, and generally raising awareness of what Article 6 can offer countries. Then just working across the top, when we refer to governance frameworks, what we're talking about there is how you translate the rules that have been decided, and great news, day one, 6.4. But those rules and the complex guidance sometimes that can come with those rules, how do you then work that into a process and a procedure within a host country government of who does what, when, and how can that be transparently shown? So that can include the strategy of what they will sell. It can include the fee structure, the benefit structure, when they will authorize. So working document still. We'll see how the negotiations finish at the end of next week, but we hope that it will allow us to complete that side. Then in parallel, it's great getting a country ready to trade, but then you need to actually have something to trade. So being able to identify additional, verifiable, real, permanent Article 6 aligned activities that could then be trades. And then obviously the moving on to facilitating the transactions, the MOUs, the bilateral agreements, the MOPAs, the monitoring of deliveries, making sure that the MRV is actually linking with the correct areas within trade agreements, and making sure everybody understands what their obligations are under any of these agreements. And then global knowledge sharing and exchange. We find this is really, really essential. And we've had an amazing program called Spark, which has been funded by the German government under the ICI funding, which has really shown the way of how countries, it's great having someone coming in and saying, well, you should do it this way. It's far better when they sit down and they sit next to a peer country who says, well, we really struggled with this bit, but this bit was a bit easier. And you can say, oh, great. Okay, well, actually, we found that bit easier. Oh, how did you do it? And that's what knowledge exchange is. It isn't standing in front of someone saying, you should do it this way. So we value that very highly. And that's also how we can reach out to even more countries outside of those that we may be specifically helping and creating global goods. And you may have seen the Spark Toolbox series of practical guides, if not www.spark.org. And lastly, quite often people are asking us, so how does it work? How do projects come in and then work through readiness and then go into carbon funds? And here we either can be generating from the work we are doing under readiness to generate those mains ourselves. There could be external pipelines where the country has project ideas or project structures that they would like to put through the CTF. And those go through a matchmaking process. So again, this is evening up the playing field a little bit, where the buyers will see a project idea and then they will bid for it. And we make a match, and the project idea will then go into one of the trust funds and potentially receive more technical assistance before a trade is completed. And also there is the ability for the individual fund participants to bring in further externally sourced activities that have not received any assistance from readiness. That, I think, gives you a very brief idea, but rather than share the slides, please feel free to get a quick photo and QR code. Actually, these screens work really well for that. So there's a quick if you want some more information. And at this point, I think now is the time to hear from countries themselves. And I am delighted to be able to introduce a consummate moderator, Amy Merrill, CEO of ICVCM, who will kindly moderate the panel discussions. Amy.
Thanks. And it's really great to be here with you this afternoon. We've got two panels and we're going to kick off with our first panel. So it's my real pleasure to invite our speakers for the first panel. Fenella, Director of Carbon Pricing at GGGI, who, as she didn't introduce herself because she's so terribly modest on her own achievements, she's spent 7 years structuring international carbon transactions with Investment Bank and helped design and run the Africa Carbon Asset Management Program between UNEP Finance Initiative and Standard Chartered. So we'll be hearing from Fenella. I'm also really pleased to introduce Faustin Munizakwe, who is the Deputy Director General of the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, who coordinates activities for the Green Climate Fund, the NDA Secretariat, the CDM-DNA, for Rwanda, the Climate Technology Centre, and also is obviously deeply involved in NDC preparation. So welcome. I'm also very pleased to have over here Sandra Lindström, who's Head of International Climate Cooperation at the Swedish Energy Authority. Prior to working with the Swedish energy authorities, Sandra worked on development of global partnerships for climate mitigation at the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and has served, as many people have in this room, as negotiators to the UNFCCC. So welcome. I think we have, that's our rather fantastic panel, and I'm going to kick off with a question to first to Sandra and Faustin, and perhaps let's take it up in that order. Can you take a moment to describe where your country is at in terms of readiness for Article 6 trading, and where you'd like to see a facility like the Carbon Transaction Facility focus its efforts on opening up carbon markets as fast as possible?
Thank you very much, moderator. For the question where Rwanda is, we have already adopted our carbon market framework, which is portraying who is doing what and when. It captures the legal and the regulatory framework for the Article 6 in Rwanda. It also shows the institutional framework when it comes for applying or managing the carbon market and Article 6 in general, where we have Rwanda Environment Management Authority as the designated national authority, which has the carbon unit facilitating all the work. Where we have also the governance structure. We have governing board, which is a cross-sectoral or high-level officials at permanent secretaries of different ministries. The governance board is chaired by the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Environment, but on that board there is also permanent secretary of different ministries, including Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Infrastructure, and other officials from different agencies. We have also the technical committee, which is mainly assessing the requests. After assessing the requests, they suggest and recommend to the governing board. So apart from the governing board and the technical committee, which is also a cross-sectoral committee, we have a carbon unit embedded in Rwanda Environment Management Authority, which is actually helping to do all the administration work. So apart from the institutional and procedure process and procedure, we have also developed our national registry, which is helping the country to do all the transaction and helping us to avoid double counting. Now the registry is operational and we can use it. Apart from putting in place legal, institutional, and capacity, we have also started the building capacity for different key stakeholders, including private sector, which is an important player in this market, high-level officials, and other like banks and other institutions. Then what are the linkage with this carbon transaction facility and the country itself? I'm seeing the linkage in two ways. One, this carbon transaction facility will help countries like Rwanda and others in the first place to, they will help the countries to build readiness at country level by building capacity of different levels. For instance, in Rwanda, we started working with the GGGI, especially on building capacity of high-level officials. After doing a series of capacity building and workshop for technical staff, we saw that it is paramount to also raise awareness and build the capacity of officials, high-level officials, so that they can at least understand and facilitate this to happen. And the first high-level meeting we had with GGGI triggered thirsty and showed us that we need to do more. People were very happy. The second linkage is again to support countries to catalyze trading of carbon credits. Creating readiness and you don't reach the end goal, it doesn't help countries like Rwanda. So we need facility like this one to help us to link the buyer and sellers so that we can achieve the end results. The end results is to get the carbon revenues in the country. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And it's really interesting to hear the structure of how processes are set up to deliver, and also to then see how you see targeted technical capacity building to be built in. I'm going to go to Sandra and ask for Sandra to present the situation in Sweden, and then in a special what do we call this? It's almost like a room change, Mbai. We're gonna prepone Mbai to join this panel because Mbai has been, who I'm sure needs no introduction, has been summoned, and so we'll add him into the first panel and hear from Mbai afterwards. So Sandra, please.
Well, thank you, Amy. So first of all, thank you to GGGI and Gold Standard for organizing this event. So in Sweden, we started developing Article 6 programs back in 2019 when we started having dialogue with countries to work with us to trade in Article 6. And it has taken a while, but now we have a number of agreements in place. We have a bilateral agreement with Ghana, and we have a memorandum of understanding with Dominican Republic, Nepal, Zambia, and Rwanda. And in terms of, so now that we have all these agreements in place. We have also partnered with strategic partners such as the World Bank, ADB, GGGI, and UNDP. And the reason for this is that we want to scale up our efforts. So we do bilateral procurements in order to find suitable Article 6 programs for our work. But it takes a lot of time to do bilateral processes, and therefore we have formed the strategic partners with international organizations. And so we hope with that the identification of programs will take place very soon. And at home, we have also developed our Article 6 framework and have that integrated in our national legislation, where we have appointed body for the authorization process, and also to make it clear for actors and project developers what the rules are to have the authorization from the Swedish national authority. So we are ready to trade Article 6 units, and very much looking forward to that.
Thanks very much. And we'll come back to Faustin and Sandra in a moment. I'd like to turn to Mbaye Diagne, who is on the Committee of Climate Change in Senegal. You probably all know him. He's been on the supervisory Article 6 supervisory body, now called the PACM, which I'm learning to get my tongue around. And maybe you can join this conversation about where Senegal is at in terms of its readiness for Article 6, and what facilities like the Carbon Transaction Facility might be useful for in your context.
Thank you, and thank you, Amy, and good afternoon, colleagues. In Senegal, we are in the process of setting up our carbon market framework. We started some years ago, before the adoption of the rules of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, through what we call the SCF, Standardized Crediting Framework, with the World Bank, to develop a framework within the country to see how we can, through Article 6, develop the carbon market in the country. And we experiment that standardized crediting framework with a CDM project, a POA, in the rural electrification, to see how it works. At the same time, we were following the negotiation to see how the lesson learned from the development of that SCF may inform the negotiations, because I'm the lead coordinator for negotiation for Africa. And after that, we get support from GGGI, thanks, to develop what we call the strategy for operationalization of Article 6 within the country, when it was adopted in 21 in Glasgow. And we had very large consultation, inclusive consultation with all type of stakeholders, to know how they are involved in the ongoing market, both voluntary carbon market as well as in the CDM, to see what are the challenges they face, to see what are the new rules within the Article 6, and what are the gaps between what is needed between the new rules and the situation within the country. And based on that, we identify the gaps and we develop a work plan to see how we can implement to allow people to really and effectively participate in the new carbon market. Because many people don't very well address that issue, but the landscape of the carbon market has completely changed with Article 6. In the past, when you talk about UNFCCC mechanisms or market, it was a compliance one. And out of that, all what we call now independent standards were in the voluntary carbon market. But now both of them are developing compliance as well as voluntary. When you see the Article 6, we develop under Article 6 units for compliance as well as units for contribution. It's for voluntary carbon market as well as carbon residue-based finance. When you see now also the independent standard like Gold Standard, Vera, and ARC3, and all of them are developing two types of units there, or expecting to develop two types of units with corresponding adjustment and unit without corresponding adjustment. And you have seen also Corsia. So to say that the market landscape has completely changed when you talk about voluntary or versus compliance market. It's not just about the standard. It's at the end of the day, the use of the unit that will determine whether it's a compliance or it's a voluntary. So based on that, we try in our strategy to encompass both Article 6.4, all the bilateral agreements, meaning the 6.2, as well as the voluntary carbon market in the same framework, with different windows, with different steps, and different requirements. It's what we set up with a very inclusive consultation with all stakeholders to know their needs, what they want, and so on. And based on that, we get support from the World Bank under the PMR, Partnership for Market Implementation, because at the same time, we were developing also to implement our NDC, a feasibility study on carbon tax, because we wanted to use that instrument also to implement our NDC. And there will be a linkage between the carbon market as well and the carbon tax, domestic carbon tax. And under the PMI, we started to develop the manual of operation to see for each of the different markets, the different steps, the procedures, how it works, the timeline, and all of that to be developed, to get a manual for that. We also conducted some additional study, the marginal abatement cost, to know what will be the cost of 1 ton of CO2, depending to the sector, the technology, and all of that. Because at the end of the day, under the compliance market, the main actor will be the government to provide the authorization, because we will have a corresponding adjustment. Based on that, we wanted to have a very clear idea on what to authorize and not to authorize. And we also worked under the PMI on the MRV, because under the Paris Agreement, it's mainly about transparency. And when you talk about transparency, there is many reporting requirements, mainly the BTR. But in addition to that BTR, under Article 6, you have an initial report, you have an annual report, as well as a biennial report, very complicated reports. All of that will be encompassed in the global MRV system within the country. So we are working on all of that, as well as the linkage between the tax and the carbon market. And based in parallel to all of that, we conducted a lot of activity in terms of readiness, mainly training, awareness of all types of actors, decision makers, local governments, line ministries, the Ministry of Environment, and all of that with the support of GGGI, which has a very good materials in work. Thank you, GGGI. And based on that, I think the facility we have seen here may be very helpful in conducting and continuing this readiness activity, because it's not just one shot. We need continuously to continue that readiness at all levels. And another issue is also, because we have some experience under the CDM, is the diversity of price we have seen in our region. We have seen some institutions that are started to see how to monitor those through the Carbon West African Alliance on Carbon Market. They are trying to support actors to see how we can influence the price, as well as we have also ECOWAS trying to see what they can do in terms of carbon market, as well as the African Union, because we realize that at this point, the market is a buyer's market. The buyers that decide to the price. You develop your project and the buyer will come and say, I pay $10 or I pay $8. And many of us, we follow the price proposed because developers and sellers are not together to be able to influence the final price. And I think having this facility and having the transparency also in terms of activities, of standards that are developed will be very helpful. Lastly, just to let know that also in Senegal, we have with GGGI a policy-based activity with Norway, because Senegal has signed many bilateral agreements with Switzerland, with Norway, with Singapore, with Japan, and we are discussing with Korea. Based on all of that, we need to encompass all of them inside. And one of them with Norway is about policy-based activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for setting that out so clearly. And we understand you have to head off now, and good luck with your coordination. And hold in your mind that policy approaches, because that's what we'll come to in our next panel setup. I'm going to turn to Fenella now to try to respond to what you've heard from our three panelists on some of those focus areas that the carbon transaction facility might want to pick up on, and then we'll move back to questions of our panelists.
Sure, and I know it's a constant moving feast, so I know Sandra has to get going as well quite shortly. So I'll be very brief. One thing that I picked up very quickly from both Faustin and from Mbai is the governing bodies. So what we forget is it's all very well going in and going, right, okay, we're going to train the Ministry of Environment, and we're going to pick the people that are in the department that look after Article 6, and we're going to train them. But as Mbai put forward, you need to have a wide stakeholder consultation. If you're putting a regulation in, it goes around all the ministries. There's not just one ministry that says, great, we want to do this regulation. You all on board? So therefore, a lot more people than you think have to understand this complicated thing that's in this very specialized area called carbon. And therefore, you need to have bodies. And we say, because there's an NDC that covers many ministries, there are many other ministries that need to do activities to help reduce emissions and to help fire forward green growth. So that governing body, that higher layer, is just showing one example of how we need to go wider on the capacity building. So I think that was one message I took really widely. And also with Sandra looking at the buy side of it, yeah, I hope you don't mind me saying, but some of these things we have to do as a journey together. I think everybody assumes every buyer knows exactly what's going on and it's all sorted and everyone's got a registry and everybody's got everything completely organized. And yeah, mostly, yes, but not always. So some things it's actually a journey to go together and to compare notes and to say, okay, what's the best way to get things working? So I think both buyers and sellers have that. I'll stop there so that you can race on to the second question. Get Sandra.
Thanks. Yeah. So let's just pivot, as one of my favorite words at the moment. Mbai talked about the sort of the need for every country to understand the policy mix in their NDC and how they're going to expose different parts of their NDC or their economy to different kind of carbon markets. He talked about the use case being the only differential between international markets and voluntary markets and, there's domestic markets. You and your team have been active working in carbon trading for over 15 years, focused on compliance markets. How do you see that sort of changing and these markets coming together now or not in the next couple of years?
But thank you, Amy, for that question. And I think we already seeing the different markets evolving right now. And I think one of the reasons why I'm saying that is we have a quite fragmented carbon market. We have the international compliance market, domestic compliance market. We have the voluntary carbon market, and we also have the result-based carbon finance. And they all have different standards, different rules and regulations. And as financiers and project developers, and also for us as buyers, it's difficult to understand and to know how the rules of the game work. And I think therefore, in order for the market to open up, we will need to see that these different carbon markets get being standardized and come together. At least that's what I hope from my side, because then it will be easier for every one of us that are involved to really understand how the different carbon markets work. Thank you.
Thanks. And just sort of picking up on that idea of converging of different carbon markets. I mean, let me turn to Faustin. How do you see, or how would you like to see sort of carbon finance coming from different carbon markets and climate finance? How would you like to see those working together and delivering in Rwanda in the future?
Thank you very much, moderator, for the question. First of all, we are seeing the carbon finance as a game changer, as one of the innovative way of attracting additional climate finance resources, comparing to traditional means we have been using. Rwanda has a unique institution, which is Rwanda Green Fund, as a special vehicle to mobilize resources. And having it already, it's part of creating the readiness, but we need to build the capacity and create a conducive framework so that the same fund, the same vehicle to mobilize resources can also be the custodian of carbon revenues which are coming in the country. On another hand, we are seeing the carbon finance also as one of the areas which will keep positioning Rwanda as ideal destination of green investment. We have signed a good number of MOUs with Singapore, with Sweden and others, which we are in the discussion. And it triggers various opportunity for us to keep facilitating investment, especially green investment in the country. Thank you.
Thanks. I think, sort of the theme is just making sure that it all doesn't duplicate and doesn't overlap. Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you very much. I think I'll turn briefly to Fenella to respond, and then we'll close this panel and move on to our policy approaches.
Thanks, Amy. I think the mosaic of different things that fit together, whether it's different types of carbon markets, a domestic market, a domestic offsetting market, a tax, and Article 6 and voluntary markets, as we heard from Mbai, it's come up with one process and procedure, and then you can adapt it. So apply or not apply a corresponding adjustment, but ensure national priorities are kept at the forefront. Or if you're looking at the finance versus the markets, we have to remember carbon trading, it's trading. Carbon, we talk about carbon finance a lot, but having sat in a dealing room for 20 years, you have to understand it's commodity trading. It's payment on delivery. It's not concessional finance that comes up front. So there's still pieces missing. You need to fit in that finance piece to cover the timing. You need financiers understanding the risks associated with doing project finance against this additional flow of income that will eventually come through like a PPA. So with that, we need to be supporting not just the centre core government, but also educating national banks, regional banks, other finances in the end. So do I think it's coming together? I think this is evidence you're hearing. We have signed with, we have done, we have put in place. So yes, not as quickly as any private sector entity would like it to go, but I think, yeah, it's beginning to. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So we'll now do a stage rejig and give us one moment, and then we'll move into looking at policy approaches.
Hello, everyone. We're now into the second part of the event, which is focused more on policy crediting and policy crediting under Article 6. My name is Hugh Sarway. I am the Senior Director for Market Development and Partnerships at Gold Standard. And we're really pleased to be co-organizing this event with GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute. I have slides which can hopefully be shown on the screen. Great, there we are. So I think lots of people in the room will know Gold Standard. We are a standard setter, which has been established over 20 years ago. We started as a labeling mechanism on the clean development mechanism. We have then moved into issuing our own carbon credits, which historically have primarily been for the voluntary markets. But as we were hearing in the last panel, the context of the market has changed. And so Gold Standard credits are still very much used in by voluntary buyers of credits, but we have also put in place the rules and are updating our requirements to be able to support Article 6 and compliance markets as well. And this is a very kind of Gold Standard centric slide, which we apologize. It misses all of the kind of details of what happens between governments, but essentially this shows how Gold Standard can be used under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So governments, potentially just a host government, sometimes within a bilateral approach, can authorize emission reductions or removals for use under Article 6. Projects can be developed by project developers, which are registered with Gold Standard. We can certify the emission reductions and removals of which have been achieved by those project developers. Carbon credits are issued as VERs, and then these can be used and then kind of ultimately accounted for as ITMOs under all of the different use cases which are there under Article 6. So use towards NDCs, use towards international mitigation purposes, so CORSIA for airlines, and then use for other purposes as well, so by companies for voluntary purposes. And then an important piece which is being put together now is how we as a standard then work with governments, whether that's just the host government or whether there's a buying government as well, how we make sure that we are sharing information and we are supporting accurate reporting by governments. And there are steps that we've taken as Gold Standard in the past few years to enable this. We have introduced new requirements for managing Article 6 authorized units. We have taken some steps to update and align our rules with Article 6 principles, and there is more that we can now do with the introduction and the adoption of the new Article 6.4 standards. We've updated our registry to be able to manage and label units properly, which are authorized under Article 6. We earlier this year provided our first reports back to governments on units that have been authorized under Article 6, and there is more that we are doing to make that process more efficient and easier for governments who are providing authorizations. And then what I wanted to talk a bit about here is creating new options for delivering impact under Article 6. And the first major step that we have done in this is publishing policy requirements earlier this year to allow policy crediting under gold standard. And this is work which has been supported by the Global Green Growth Institute under their Designing Article 6, forget the full word, policy approaches, Designing Article 6 policy approaches, the DAPA program, which is funded by the government of Norway. And we really welcome the collaboration which we have had with GGGI to develop this. So what do we mean when we're talking about policy-based crediting? So gold standard, like other standards in the market, have typically and still now certify project-based approaches, sometimes within programs of activities, but at the project level. And in that approach, we need to make sure that activities and emission reductions achieved are additional. So what is being implemented would not have gone ahead without the incentive of carbon finance. So we need to look at financial additionality, and also that the activity is not required under regulation. Activities are then implemented, the impact is measured, is verified, and then credits are issued. So that's the classic project-based approach. When we look at policy-based crediting, a lot of the principles, a lot of the pieces stay the same. But what's different is we're looking here at activities and at real impact, which is delivered because a policy is put in place, not because of its absence, but because a policy has been introduced. And what we're trying to measure is the impact which is delivered by the introduction of a policy. And what's important to say is additionality is still important in this. And we were supported in the work that we have done by Perspectives to look at how additionality can work under a policy-based approach. And it's still important under this approach to look at additionality at the level of the activity, but also to make sure that the policy would not have been introduced without the ability and the incentive of carbon finance. So additionality remains important, but that needs to be managed in a different way under a policy approach. And how we set this up in gold standard essentially looks like a program of activities model where a policy intervention takes place, is introduced by a government. This can be at the national level or the subnational level. A policy-based program is registered with the standard. And underneath that, you have activities which are kind of directly caused by the introduction of the policy. And it's at this activity level that we measure impact using methodologies that are already established, but making sure that we're thinking about things like the baseline properly when this is done. And just to illustrate with an example, a new feed-in tariff scheme could be introduced by a national ministry. A program related to this can be registered with gold standard, and that can be done by or on behalf of the ministry. The first cases of actual implemented activities can sit beneath this, so potentially solar, potentially wind, and you have the first cases which sit beneath that. And then you have following cases which follow through after that, which follow the same renewable technologies. And this is the model which has been put in place to try to draw on what already exists in our standard, to try to draw on what's already been established over time, what's well known and what's well recognized, but to adapt it to a policy-based approach in order to allow for greater scale under Article 6. And something which is important to say, we don't see this being a replacement to project-based activities for now. This is an additional option which exists alongside that, and one which we think can be important under Article 6, where if you're a buyer, but also if you're a government which is hosting, you want to see impact at scale, and that's what we urgently need. And that's the role that we see policy approaches taking. And again, I wanted to reflect, we haven't just taken the kind of current model and seen how we can adapt it. We've also made sure that all of the core principles of what exists in gold standard and what delivers integrity through gold standard are still there in policy approaches, but in some cases tweaked as is needed. So stakeholder inclusivity, stakeholder consultation is still required, both at the activity level, but also in the design of the policy. Sustainable development goals need to be targeted, and they need to be monitored and verified as well. Safeguards still need to be in place in the same way. And we need to see that there are real outcomes which are delivered by policy-based approaches. Some of these principles, the way that we do things, has had to change to be more appropriate for a policy-based approach, but the core principles stay the same, and they're kind of embedded in what we're looking to do. This doesn't work for all policies, or at least we're not comfortable with working for all policies straight away. If you're going to be looking at and issuing credits or delivering ITMOs based on a policy-based approach, we need to make sure there is confidence that the emission reductions achieved have been caused by that policy. And so we are starting with a bit more of a cautious approach in terms of the types of policies that we see being possible. This doesn't mean this is the end of the road, but this is where we are starting. And that's another important thing to say as well. This is a model which we are piloting right now. For us, this is certainly new. For the market as a whole, this is new. And we want to take a cautious approach to pilot with a small set of policies to learn along the way, and to try to improve where that's needed, but also to provide an example that can be helpful across the market. For instance, maybe in Article 6.4 or elsewhere as well. So this is really about providing an innovative route for scaling impact under Article 6 and allowing different options to be present. I'm not as savvy as GGGI. We don't have a QR code for you to scan, but you can take a photo and feel free to reach out if you're interested in finding out more. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we'll spend the remainder of this side event looking now at the way that policy approaches can work in the context of crediting. And I'd like to introduce our two panel members, and Hugh will stay on and on the panel as well. I'd like to introduce Hanya Dawood, Practice Manager at the Climate Change Group of the World Bank, previously worked at the IFC and led a team focused on carbon markets. Hanya is also a board member of the Climate Action Data Trust, which is seeking to be able to provide transparency and harmonize carbon credit data from major registries. And then I'm pleased to also welcome John Erik Pudst, who's a senior advisor of the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment, policy specialist, specializing in areas such as market-based cooperation, quelle surprise, and on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, REDD+, climate finance, and the UN governance structure. So welcome to you both. The first question we have for you, just to sort of warm us up into the context of a discussion around policy level crediting. We're hearing a lot about the need to scale up and finance under Article 6, about the need to get it going so it can actually fulfill the role that parties intend for it. Talk about policy level crediting and how and if that could play a role in this scaling, and in particular the perspectives of your organizations in that. Maybe we'll start with start over on that side and come over onto this side.
Okay, thank you. So Norway is a strong believer in policy level crediting as a tool to achieve higher ambitions and scaled up emission reductions. And we have been supporting this type of development and policy and sectoral approaches since the time of the Kyoto Protocol. And we are currently working with several countries, including Senegal and Morocco, to develop sectoral and policy approaches, and really starting to see the potential for transformative programs that can deliver emission reductions at scale. So they're very promising, what we have in the pipeline at the moment. But in addition to scale, there are several other reasons why we believe policy level crediting is important. It allows us to take holistic approaches to emission reductions and work to transform full sectors of the economy. Cooperation at the policy level makes it possible to support carbon pricing tools under Article 6. It can help us address multiple drivers of emissions within a sector, within the same program. and crediting structure. And it really helps us creating lasting impacts and preventing an increase in emissions once the cooperation ends. That said, this is really not an approach that will fit every country or every sector of the economy. Countries are unique, and there will be a need for project crediting going forward. And there's not really a one-size-fits-all here. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks. Hanya, let me pass to you, and then we'll do a second round of questions.
Is this better? Oh, there we go. So we were talking about the complexity around different types of markets, VCM, Article 6, domestic. Similarly, there's a lot of complexity around different types of projects, reduction, removals, project-based, sector-based, and policy crediting. But of course, policy crediting is a mechanism. The idea is to reward countries for making policy changes that align with broader development impacts. And some examples: reducing energy subsidies, removing harmful subsidies to correct users' wasteful behavior. So we heard a little bit about the work that Gold Standard is doing in this space, and I'd like to share an example of an actual project that was supported by the World Bank, where we did use policy crediting. And under the TCAF program, some of our donors are here in the room. In Uzbekistan, energy subsidies were obviously distorting the actual cost of energy and use and production. So we used the policy crediting approach to reward the country for changing these policies. Now, it's very obvious why this is needed. I mean, I was looking at CPI's latest numbers. Climate finance flows were $1.5 trillion. Fossil fuel subsidies were $1.5 trillion in 2023. So if we can actually get this policy crediting approach mainstreams, you can really move the needle on climate. But of course, it's not easy. Here, you need actual intention from governments to want to do this. The MRV system considerations are also a little bit complicated, but because this is about modeling the policy impacts, both ex ante and ex post, and that requires a lot of data points. And then lastly, such standards need to be recognized. And it's great to see Gold Standard really leaning into this, and the policy-based approach that we developed for the Uzbekistan program. There are discussions also with the UNFCCC around recognition under Article 6. So I think it's still a long way to go, but it's really great to see some actual examples where we have made progress.
Thanks very much. And I want to pick up on the point about it, complexity and challenges in, the real world implementation of things. Hugh, do you want to jump in? We've got time if you'd like to just jump in and talk to, innovations that you're seeing in your work on policy and how that feeds across the market. And then I'll turn back to John Eric and Hanya.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the first examples since adoption of the rules in Glasgow of where Gold Standard is looking to innovate in different approaches which could support impact under Article 6. I think when I was talking earlier, there is a new landscape now, and Article 6.2 provides more flexibility than you had before in how countries can cooperate. So project-based approaches are still there and will still be important, but policy approaches can sit alongside that. And I think there is a role for standards like us in testing out new approaches. And it's something which we've kind of done in the past. So Gold Standard took steps to enable sustainable development monitoring under our standard, took steps to develop an SDG tool, which was one of those that was learned from in the design of the Article 6.4 tool. And so I think there can be a useful complementary role between independent standards, Article 6.4. There's a lot that we can learn from the way that standard's developing. Hopefully there's some stuff that we're doing which can be learned from as well.
Thanks. And I think it sort of builds into that, emerging real understanding of different actors in the market, of just how relevant everything else that is going on is to everyone's work, and this sort of, as Mbai said, this looking across the market and trying to push everyone toward best practice and innovation. John Eric, can you maybe come in on some of the thinking behind policy approaches and challenges in actually getting right down into the detail, and talk about some of the work you've been doing with partner countries on really implementing them, and those issues around additionality, causality, and other obstacles along the way?
Yeah, sure. So I think the Norwegian approach, and the reason why we've supported policy level crediting and development of that type of program, is a realization that for carbon markets to truly make a global impact, we need to create change at a much greater scale than we have done in the past. And to do that, we also need to scale up our crediting approaches. That's one side of it. But the other is Norway's experience from the forestry sector and involvement in RED. We know that a sector-wide approach is needed from that sector to turn things around, and that single projects simply is not enough. So when it comes to challenges and lessons learned, I mean, there's many things I can mention, but I'll try and mention a few of the things that we've seen working on this over the years. Firstly, it takes a lot of time to develop policy level crediting programs that deliver carbon credits with good environmental integrity. And I mean, part of the reason has been the lack of guidance under Article 6, and we're still sort of in a piloting phase of these programs. But these programs also demand a lot from host countries in terms of institutional and regulatory setups. Management of both MRV systems and subsidy schemes are very complex operations. However, we do believe that the models we're currently developing, like the work we're doing in Senegal and Morocco, are models that can be replicated in other countries. So hopefully this will sort of take down the transaction cost in the future. Another lesson learned is that we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. Countries varies greatly when it comes to institutional capacity, their NDC ambitions, which sectors have the highest emissions, and the capacity and maturity in the private sector to create change. So because of that, Norway has taken a very bottom-up approach, such as the DAPA program, together with the GGGI, to develop programs under Article 6. We want the host countries to really be in the driver's seat, as they know their own economy and emission reductions potential best. And thirdly, I think I can mention the need for host country buy-in for policy-based programs to be successful. Without real support from both the government and the involved parties in the private sector, we are just not going to achieve the results we want. And this takes time and effort, and has to be an integral part of the program development. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. And so what I'm going to try and do is kind of pull us back up to the higher level, and then pass to Hanya to talk about a product that a number of partners in this space have been working on to help set that scene for countries who are starting to organize how to incentivize policy mixes. So, we've heard all these different building blocks. We've heard about how policy approaches are a space where we're looking at, additionality and causality alongside that project space where we have much more familiar concepts, and the work that's been done to try to understand how you measure the impact of the presence of policies rather than the absence of policies. So we've talked about, different types of ways of crediting. We've also talked about different markets in which crediting is happening and how they're building together voluntary markets, Article 6 as it operationalizes under 6.4, ways of routing through 6.2, including using what were previously just voluntary carbon market standards, and bringing together this kind of suite of ways for developers to bring finance and technology transfer into their communities and deliver to multiple different end use cases, including, and we haven't covered that, sort of domestic compliance demand that's emerging around the world. And then, on the layer above that, how do you make the finance work? Where is the market maker? How are you connecting buyers and sellers so that you can build a fair market framework with the right kind of prices? We had mention of prices. We know about the issue of partnering and returning revenues to implementers, and also ensuring that transaction complexity is not overwhelming. Work of the Carbon Transaction Facility, and then taking that right back to the policy layer that government needs to have, right from the highest level engagement across all the different ministries and around the frameworks for each ministry to take decisions within their relative competence, and it to represent the way that you build those blocks all together into an NDC. So, I used to get told, don't talk about carbon markets being complex. The reality is real world implementation is complex, but what's really interesting, I think, is that we can do it, because actually anyone who's spent enough time in these markets understands that complexity has a purpose. It's delivering real world, it's capable of delivering real world and real implementable benefits to different stakeholders who are part of the puzzle. So I'm not scared of the word complexity. I think it's like sophistication. And I'm really glad that when we can build a puzzle across an hour and a half like this, we know it means we're really in there doing it. And so I'm going to now hand back to Fenella, and I hope everyone will take away the fact that these are examples of real world implementation of carbon finance being delivered in reality through government frameworks. I'm going to hand back to Fenella. Thank you very much for having me, and we'll move to Fenella's close.
Thank you very much, Amy. And for those that aren't familiar, although I assume most are in the room, that Amy's previous life before heading ICVCM was spending very long hours as the main legal counsel for UNFCCC negotiations. So I think maybe getting a little more sleep nowadays, maybe. Okay, to conclude, one thing that many of you may not know is that GGGI is going to be changing its Director General, and a new Director General will be arriving in January, and I am most happy to introduce him to give some brief concluding remarks to the session. So Dr. Sang-Yup Kim, please.
Thank you. I have arrived earlier than coming January because I'm really excited about this important gathering here. I am really immensely impressed by the intense aspirations for new, unprecedented opportunities while facing these kind of planetary climate challenges. I don't think we are where we need to be yet. We must speed up and scale up our climate actions. And as the new head of the GGGI, I feel we are going to exercise two new innovative initiatives. One is about AI and digital transformation. Just a minute ago, I had a meeting with the Secretary General of ITU, International Telecommunication Union, and also the Vice President of the World Bank, who is newly appointed to be in charge of digital transformation. So I do believe green transformation and digital transformation should go together, and they can go together. That will be the one way. And we will really, really take advantage of the better side of AI in an exponential way to make things happen in a scalable way. The other thing is this. We are going to accelerate new carbon opportunities, especially exploiting the Article 6 mechanism in a scalable and an innovative way. In this regard, I am really, really excited that the GGGI has led the partnership with Gold Standard along with the Swedish and Norwegian government. Gold Standard has been at the forefront of establishing our high integrity carbon market standards. And it will be really valuable working with the countries like Senegal, Vanuatu, and Rwanda. And I am confident we can make first case of successful story. The world is hungry for a real successful story that can be replicable and scalable. I think we can do that. For that, I must recognize my darling Vanilla sleeps nice. She doesn't sleep at all. And her step. I thank you for that. And I also thank you, Hugh Selway of Gold Standard. It seems to me a kind of James Bond. He's making things better way, right? So I thank you for your great contribution to this wonderful partnership. Hope to see you soon next year. Thank you very much. And thank you all of your participation. Thank you very much.
And I'm just going to alert you to the fact that we're going to send around the document that we couldn't get on the screen just because of our USB challenge that the World Bank has been working on with other partners around that introduction to the framework of Hannah, do you want to just?
Yeah, I have a bunch of cards if anyone is interested, but in a nutshell, what this framework is all about is guidance for countries on how to think about engaging in carbon markets and the different parts of carbon markets. And it's the first step. We're very excited. We're working with ICBCM, GGGI, VCMI, Article 6 Implementation Partnership, and UNDP. So the key capacity building providers. And it's a work program that will continue over the course of the year to really issue guidance notes and really have a one-stop shop so countries know where to go for different parts of the framework. So very happy to give out some pamphlets.
Really extremely grateful for the efforts and contributions of the Integrity Council for the voluntary carbon market. It is wonderful. Thank you.
So let's take away the closing quote. Intense aspiration for innovative opportunities. Okay, thanks very much.